Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. Tonight, we're heading to Alaska, and I'm going to tell you something that will change how you see this place forever. What if I told you there are 8 documented cases, real reports from real people, that the government doesn't want you to know about? Things seen in the sky that defied physics. Creatures that left marks on metal that shouldn't exist. Entire towns abandoned overnight with no official explanation. And something frozen in the ice for thousands of years that's starting to wake up. These stories come from pilots, workers, military personnel, ordinary people doing their jobs who saw something that destroyed their careers, their sanity, and their lives. Some of them disappeared. Some of them were silenced. But their stories survived. If you're new to Mr. Midnight, hit that subscribe button right now, because we dive into the true horror that hides in plain sight. Turn off your lights, because once you hear these 8 stories, you'll understand why Alaska is called the last frontier. And trust me, after tonight, you'll know exactly what it's the last frontier from. Let's begin. My name is Captain Kenjiro Terauchi, and I've been flying commercial aircraft for Japan Airlines for 23 years. I started as a flight engineer back in 1963, worked my way up through co-pilot, and earned my captain's wings in 1974. I've flown everything from domestic hops between Tokyo and Osaka to long international routes across the Pacific. In all those years, I've handled engine failures, severe weather, and emergency landings. I thought I'd seen everything the skies could throw at me. I was wrong. What happened on November 17th, 1986, during what should have been a routine cargo flight from Paris to Tokyo, changed everything I thought I knew about flying. We were carrying a load of French wine, nothing unusual about that. It was supposed to be just another milk run across the North Pole route, the kind of flight I'd done hundreds of times before. But somewhere over the frozen wilderness of Alaska, we encountered something that wasn't supposed to exist. Something that followed us for over an hour. Something so massive it dwarfed our Boeing 747 like a toy. The FAA investigated for 3 years after what happened that night. They interviewed me, my crew, ground control, military radar operators, and dozens of witnesses. Their final report? Unexplained aerial phenomenon. That's government speak for, we have no idea what the hell this was. The flight started normal enough. Flight 1628 was a regular cargo run. We did these polar routes twice a week during winter months. Shorter flight time, better fuel efficiency, and honestly, the views were incredible when the weather was clear. That night, we had perfect conditions. Clear skies, light winds, and excellent visibility. I was flying with my regular crew, co-pilot Takanaka, who'd been with JAL for 15 years, and flight engineer Tsukuda, one of the best I'd ever worked with. These guys knew the 747-200F inside and out. We'd flown together for 3 years, and I trusted them completely. Our route took us from Anchorage northwest toward the North Pole, then down through Siberian airspace toward Japan. Standard polar route. We were cruising at 35,000 feet, doing about 600 miles per hour. Everything was running perfectly. All 4 engines smooth, navigation systems working fine, fuel burn exactly where it should be. The cargo hold was full of French wine bound for Tokyo, it is fame, about 17 tons of it. Nothing dangerous, nothing that would cause problems. We'd filed our flight plan days earlier, got all our clearances, and were right on schedule. At 5:11 p.m. local time, we were about 150 miles northeast of Anchorage when I first noticed something odd. Just a glint of light off to our left, maybe 10 o'clock position. Could have been another aircraft, but there wasn't supposed to be any traffic in our area. The nearest commercial route was hundreds of miles south. Anchorage Control, Japan Air 1628, I called on the radio. We have traffic at 10 o'clock, looks like 2 small aircraft. Japan Air 1628, we show no traffic in your vicinity. Can you describe what you're seeing? I looked again through the left side window. The lights were still there, but they weren't moving like normal aircraft. They seemed to be keeping pace with us, which was impossible at our speed and altitude. Control, we have 2 small objects with bright lights. They appear to be following our flight path. That's when things started getting strange. The 2 small objects had been with us for about 10 minutes when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. They weren't just following us, They were radiating heat. Actual heat I could see with my own eyes. "Takanaka," I said to my co-pilot, "look at the windscreen. The ice that normally built up on our windows during polar flights was melting. Not just a little bit. It was streaming down like we were sitting in the sun instead of flying through sub-zero air at 35,000 feet. "That's too impossible, Captain," Tsukuda said from the flight engineer's station. "Outside temperature is minus 47 degrees Celsius. But the evidence was right in front of us. The heat was so intense I could feel it on my face through the cockpit windows. These weren't normal aircraft. No engine produced that kind of radiant heat without being visible. Anchorage control, Japan Air 1628. These objects are producing significant heat signature. Our windscreen ice is melting from thermal radiation. Japan Air 1628, can you estimate the size of these objects?" I squinted through the side window, trying to get a better look. The lights were arranged in geometric patterns, not the standard red and green navigation lights of commercial aircraft. And they were bigger than I'd first thought. "Control. Each object appears to be roughly the size of a DC-8, maybe larger." "Copy that. Japan Air 1628. Are you declaring an emergency at this time?" I hesitated. We weren't in immediate danger. All our systems were working fine, engines running smooth, no mechanical problems. But something was definitely wrong. "Negative, Control. Not declaring emergency, but these objects have been pacing us for 15 minutes now. They're maintaining exact speed and altitude." That's when the third one appeared. It came up from below us, rising like an elevator through the sky. But this one wasn't small like the others. This one was massive, easily twice the size of an aircraft carrier, maybe more. It had the same geometric light patterns, but arranged in perfect symmetrical designs across its hull. "Jesus Christ," Takanaka whispered. "Anchorage control, we now have a third object. Much larger than the first two. Size of? Hell, I don't know what to compare it to. Biggest thing I've ever seen in the air. Japan Air 1628. We're showing intermittent radar contact on something in your vicinity. Can you confirm your position and altitude?" I checked our instruments. Everything looked normal from our end. "Control, we're maintaining flight level 350, position approximately 64 degrees north, 155 degrees west, speed 600 knots. Copy Japan Air 1628. We have a military installation nearby. Stand by." The next 40 minutes were the longest of my flying career. The massive object I have inside it of, and I can't think of any other word for it except ship, positioned itself directly above us. I could see it clearly now through the overhead windows. It was dark metallic, with lights arranged in perfect geometric patterns. The thing had to be at least 2,000 feet long and maybe 500 feet wide. It was following our exact flight path, matching our speed perfectly. "Elmendorf Air Force Base, this is Anchorage Control. We have a commercial aircraft reporting 3 unknown objects. Can you confirm any military traffic in the area?" "Anchorage Control, this is Elmendorf Approach. We show 3 unknowns pacing a commercial aircraft. We're scrambling intercept aircraft now." That should have made me feel better. Military backup was on the way. But instead, our instruments started going crazy. "Captain," Tsukuda called out, "look at these fuel readings." I turned to check the fuel gauges. They were showing impossible numbers that changed by thousands of pounds every few seconds. One moment we had 8,000 pounds of fuel. The next moment it jumped to 25,000, then dropped to 3,000. "That can't be right," I said. "Run a manual calculation." But it wasn't just the fuel gauges. Our compass started spinning like a top. The navigation system was showing us flying in 3 different directions at once. The radio altimeter was reading altitude changes of 10,000 feet, while our primary altimeter showed steady level flight. "Anchorage Control, Japan Air 1628. We're experiencing multiple instrument failures. Compass, fuel gauges, navigation systems, all giving conflicting readings. Japan Air 1628. Your transponder signal is strong and normal. We show you maintaining altitude and heading." So our instruments were going haywire, but ground control saw us flying normally. The massive object above us was somehow interfering with our electronics without affecting our actual flight path. That's when the heat got worse. The cockpit temperature started climbing despite our environmental controls running at maximum cooling. Sweat was running down my face, and I could see Takanaka loosening his collar. The plastic trim around the windows was actually starting to soften from the heat. "Captain," Takanaka said, "the temperature gauge is reading 140 degrees Fahrenheit in the cockpit." But here's the really crazy part. The passenger cabin temperature was normal. Whatever was affecting us was focused specifically on the cockpit, like something was studying us directly. "Control, be advised we're experiencing extreme heat in the cockpit. Cockpit temperature 140 degrees and climbing. Japan Air 1628. Do you need to declare an emergency? We can vector you to Fairbanks." I was about to answer when the large object started moving. Not away from us, closer. It descended until it was maybe 500 feet directly overhead. The heat became almost unbearable. "Tsukuda, shut down all non-essential electrical systems," I ordered. "Maybe we can reduce the interference." But turning off systems only made things worse. The object seemed to respond to our actions, moving closer when we reduced power, moving away when we increased it. Like it was testing us, seeing how we'd react. "Anchorage control. Fairbanks Tower reports visual contact with your aircraft and multiple unknown objects." "What do they see, control?" "Japan Air 1628. Fairbanks reports your aircraft appears normal, but there are 3 large objects in formation with you. Objects appear to be metallic and much larger than conventional aircraft." So, we had visual confirmation from the ground. This wasn't just instrument malfunction or crew hallucination. Other people could see these things. The military jets arrived 20 minutes later. I could hear them on the emergency frequency, trying to get close enough for visual identification. "Elmendorf Flight 02, we have visual on the commercial aircraft. There are 3 objects with it. The big one has to be 2,000 feet long. How is that thing staying in the air?" "Elmendorf Flight 02, can you identify the objects?" "Negative, control. Nothing in our aircraft identification manual. These aren't conventional aircraft." Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, everything changed. The massive object moved directly over us, so close I thought it might actually make contact with our aircraft. The heat became so intense that warning lights started flashing all over our instrument panel. The radio filled with static, and I could hear multiple ground control stations trying to reach us. "Japan Air 1628. Japan Air 1628, please respond." I tried to key the microphone, but the radio was squealing with interference. Through the overhead windows, I could see the bottom of the huge object. It wasn't smooth like an aircraft hull. It had structures, what looked like mechanical details, patterns of lights that pulsed in sequence. Then it spoke to us. Not through the radio. The sound came from everywhere at once, like the air itself was vibrating. It wasn't words, more like musical tones, but somehow I understood it was trying to communicate. "Captain," Takanaka said, his voice shaking, "are you hearing this?" "I hear it." The tones continued for maybe 30 seconds and then stopped. The massive object began moving away, slowly at first, then faster. The 2 smaller objects followed it, maintaining their geometric formation. "All objects moving away now," I reported to control. "Heat is decreasing, instruments beginning to return to normal. Japan Air 1628, we confirm objects are departing your location. Military aircraft are pursuing but cannot match their speed." I watched through the left window as the 3 objects accelerated away from us. They didn't move like aircraft, AV9. There was no gradual speed increase, no banking turns. They just moved faster and faster in a straight line until they became points of light, then disappeared completely. "Objects are gone, control. Completely disappeared from view." Japan Air 1628. Elmendorf reports the objects accelerated beyond Mach 3 and disappeared from radar. No conventional aircraft can achieve that performance. Within minutes, all our instruments returned to normal. The compass stopped spinning and pointed north. The fuel gauges showed our actual fuel load. The navigation system locked on to our correct position and heading. The heat disappeared, and cockpit temperature dropped back to normal. It was like nothing had ever happened, except for the 47 minutes of radio traffic recorded by anchorage control and visual confirmation from Fairbanks Tower and military interceptors. We completed the flight to Tokyo without any other incidents. I filed my report with Japan Airlines as soon as we landed, documenting everything that had happened. Within 24 hours, representatives from the Federal Aviation Administration contacted me for interviews. The FAA investigation lasted 3 years. They interviewed everyone: me, my crew, all the ground control operators who handled our flight, the military pilots who attempted intercept, and the radar operators who tracked the objects. They analyzed our aircraft for any signs of electromagnetic interference or heat damage. They checked our maintenance records, our crew medical files, even our psychological evaluations. Their conclusion: the flight crew reported an encounter with unidentified aerial phenomena. Multiple ground-based and airborne witnesses corroborated portions of the crew's account. No conventional explanation could be determined for the reported events. Japan Airlines quietly transferred me to domestic routes after the investigation concluded. They said it was a normal rotation, but I knew better. International pilots who report UFO encounters don't stay on international routes very long. I retired in 1993 after 30 years of flying. I never saw anything like those objects again, though I found myself scanning the sky more carefully on every flight, especially over remote areas. The thing that bothers me most isn't that we saw something unexplained. It's that whatever those objects were, they seemed specifically interested in us. They didn't just happen to be in our airspace. They followed us, studied us, tested our reactions. The way they responded to our instrument readings, the focused heat on our cockpit, the attempted communication, it all felt deliberate. I still get calls from researchers and journalists asking about Flight 1628. Most people want to know if I really believe we encountered alien spacecraft. I tell them the same thing I told the FAA. I don't know what those objects were, but they weren't conventional aircraft, and they demonstrated flight capabilities beyond anything in human technology in 1986. The official files are still classified, but I've heard rumors that similar encounters have been reported by other commercial pilots, especially on polar routes. Most don't file reports anymore. The career consequences aren't worth it. But I'll tell you this, if you're ever flying over Alaska and your instruments start acting up for no reason, pay attention to the sky around you. We might not be alone up there, and whatever's sharing the airspace with us has been watching us a lot longer than we've been watching for them. The truth is somewhere in those files the government won't release. Until then, all we have are the testimonies of professional pilots who risk their careers to tell people what they've seen. Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever get real answers. Other times, I wonder if we really want them. My name is Thomas Larson, and I've been a postmaster for the U.S. Postal Service for 18 years. I started as a mail carrier in Anchorage back in 1931, worked my way up through the system, got my postmaster certification in 1940. I've handled everything from blizzard deliveries to angry bears getting into mail trucks. The territory of Alaska isn't easy country for postal work, but I take pride in making sure people get their mail, no matter how remote they are. In 1943, I got assigned to Portlock, a small fishing village on the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula. Population of 57 people, mostly native Alaskan families who'd been fishing these waters for generations, plus some cannery workers from the lower 48. It was supposed to be a quiet posting: run, sort mail, run the small post office, coordinate with the mail plane that came twice a week. Simple work. But what happened in Portlock between 1943 and 1949 wasn't simple at all. It was something that made the territorial government evacuate every single person from that village. Something that still makes my hands shake when I write these reports. And I'm writing this down because people need to know the truth about why Portlock is still empty today, almost 20 years later. I'd been in Portlock for 2 weeks when Andrew Carillion died. Andrew was the cannery foreman, been running the operation for 8 years. Good man, knew those waters better than anyone. He was supposed to check the equipment that morning, make sure everything was ready for the season. Mary Kvasnikoff found him around noon. She was walking to the schoolhouse when she saw him lying outside the cannery, about 50 yards from the main building. At first, she thought maybe he'd had a heart attack or slipped on the ice. But when she got closer, she started screaming. I was sorting mail when I heard her. Ran outside with half the village. What we saw, I still see it in my dreams. Andrew's body was torn up like something had used him as a scratching post. Deep claw marks across his chest and back, 4 parallel lines that went right through his heavy coat and into the flesh. No animal I knew made marks like that, but it was the footprints that really got to us. Right there in the mud next to Andrew's body. Footprints that were 18 inches long. Not bear paws. Not moose hooves. Human-shaped, but bigger than any human foot I'd ever seen. The toes were spread wide, like whoever made them was carrying something heavy. The village elder, Peter Koniag Jr., said it looked like Nantianak tracks. That's the old word for something half man, half beast. I figured it was just an old story, something to scare kids. But those tracks were real. I measured them myself with my postal ruler. 3 months later, Paul Kvasnikov went missing. Paul was Mary's husband, one of the best fishermen in the village. He went out to check his nets along the shore like he did every morning. When he didn't come back by evening, we organized a search party. We found his boat the next day, floating perfectly fine about a quarter-mile offshore. Engine was off, but there was nothing wrong with it. Started right up when we tried it. But Paul's nets? They were destroyed. Not cut or torn by rocks, they looked like giant hands had grabbed them and ripped them apart. The mesh was stretched and broken in ways that made no sense. Paul's tackle box was still there. His lunch was still there. His jacket was folded neat on the seat. But Paul was gone, and there was no sign of what happened to him. The water around there was only about 10 feet deep. If he'd fallen in, we would have found the body. That's when people started talking about the tracks near the cannery again. And that's when the children started seeing things. September came early that year, with the first snow falling before the end of August. The kids were playing near the tree line when they came running back to the village, all talking at once about the giant hairy man they'd seen watching them from the woods. At first, we figured it was just kids being kids, but then Mary Kvasnikov saw it too. She was cleaning the schoolhouse windows one evening when something moved past the trees behind the building. She said it was at least 9 feet tall, walking upright like a person but covered in dark hair. It stopped and looked right at the school, then disappeared back into the forest. The next morning, we found more of those massive footprints around the schoolhouse. And something else, the village generator building had been damaged. Not damaged like a storm hit it, damaged like someone had thrown rocks at it. Big rocks, the kind that would take 2 men to lift, but these rocks had been thrown hard enough to crack the wooden walls. I found one of them, a chunk of granite about the size of a mailbag, had to be close to 200 pounds. It was embedded 6 inches into the wall, 8 feet off the ground. No human could throw something like that. The winter of 1943 to 1944 was when things got really bad. Food started disappearing from the village. Not from houses, from the storage cellars and food caches where families kept their preserved fish and winter supplies. The old-style storage places that were supposed to be bear-proof. But this wasn't bears. The handprints left in the snow around the broken storage areas were huge. I'm talking handprints that were 12 inches from wrist to fingertip, with fingers thick as sausages. They led away from the village and up into the mountains, but we never followed them far. Something about those tracks made your skin crawl. By spring, we'd lost 3 families. The Andersons packed up in February and moved to Seward. The Kowalskis left in March. They said they couldn't sleep anymore, knowing something was out there watching the village, taking what it wanted. I started keeping detailed records in my postal logs. Date, time, weather conditions, what happened. The Postal Service requires good record keeping, and I figured someone needed to document what was going on. I sent reports to Anchorage, but they kept getting lost or filed away. Nobody wanted to believe what was happening in Portlock. Peter Koniag Jr. had enough by spring of 1944. He organized a hunting party, 8 men with rifles, planning to track whatever was out there and put an end to it. They followed the footprints for 12 miles up into the mountains, into country that most of the villagers had never seen. What they found scared them more than the creature itself. Hidden back in the rocks, they discovered what looked like shelters, not caves, built shelters, made from logs and branches. Primitive, but showing real intelligence. There were bones scattered around, some from fish and game, but others that looked uncomfortably human-sized. The hunting party came back that evening, but they weren't the same men who'd left that morning. Peter wouldn't talk about what else they'd seen up there. He just said they needed to be more careful keep the children close to the village, and make sure everyone was armed. That summer, the creature got bolder. It started throwing rocks at the fishing boats when they went out, not trying to hit the men, just to making a point, showing that it could reach them even on the water. Anna Larson, my wife, was working late at the bakery one night when she saw a face at the window. A human face, but wrong. Too big, too wide, covered in hair. It watched her for maybe 30 seconds, then disappeared. Anna moved in with the Konings the next day. She couldn't stay alone anymore. Fall of 1944 brought something new: sounds. Every night for 2 months, starting right around sunset, something would start howling in the mountains. It wasn't like any animal sound we knew. It was like a man screaming, but deeper, more powerful. The sound would echo through the valley for hours, sometimes until dawn. People stopped sleeping. Kids started having nightmares. Even the dogs in the village would hide when the howling started. By November, we'd lost 5 more families. The population was down to 23 people, and those who stayed were only staying because they had nowhere else to go. I kept sending reports to Anchorage, kept documenting everything. The postal inspector who came through that December read my logs and told me to stop writing fiction and focus on mail delivery. But I kept writing. Someone had to record what was happening. The winter of 1944 to 1945 was the worst yet. The creature, because by then everyone knew there was something out there, became more aggressive. It would approach the village at night, leaving footprints in the snow right up to people's doors. Families started sleeping in shifts, keeping watch. By 1945, we were down to 15 people. By 1946, 12. The cannery shut down, $1, not enough workers, and the seasonal crew refused to come back. The mail plane started skipping deliveries because there weren't enough people to make it worth the fuel. February 18th, 1949. That's the date that ended everything. We were having a village meeting in the old community hall, Ruvo, just 8 of us left by then, discussing whether to officially abandon Portlock or try to hold on through 1 more year. The decision was made for us. Around 9 o'clock, we heard something outside, heavy footsteps circling the building. Peter looked out the window and saw it clearly for the first time. 9 feet tall, covered in dark hair, arms long enough to drag on the ground. It was looking right back at him. Then, it attacked the building. The sound was incredible, like a freight train hitting the hall. The whole structure shook. We could hear claws tearing through the wooden walls, starting about 8 feet off the ground and going higher. The creature was trying to tear the roof off. We all had guns, but nobody wanted to go outside. We huddled in the center of the room while whatever was out there destroyed the building around us. The attack went on for maybe 10 minutes, then stopped. Complete silence. When we finally got brave enough to look outside, it was gone. But the damage was incredible. Claw marks 8 feet high on all 4 walls. Part of the roof was torn away. Rafters snapped like twigs. No animal could have done that, no human either. 3 weeks later, I sent my final report to the territorial government. Not to the postal service, to ETA, to the territorial governor's office. I laid out everything that had happened, included copies of all my logs and documentation. I told them that Portlock was no longer safe for human habitation. To my surprise, they listened. In March of 1949, the territorial government officially evacuated the remaining residents of Portlock. They classified the village as uninhabitable due to unexplained wildlife threats. Everyone was relocated to larger towns. The post office was closed permanently. I was transferred to Fairbanks, got a commendation for my detailed record keeping and dedication to duty. Nobody ever officially acknowledged what really happened in Portlock, but they made sure I was taken care of. It's been 20 years since the evacuation. I'm retired now, living in Anchorage, but I still get reports from bush pilots and hunters who fly over the Portlock area. The village is still there, buildings falling down, being reclaimed by the forest. But people still see things. Large shapes moving through the trees. Footprints on the beaches. The old-timers still call it Nantianak country. I kept copies of all my postal logs from those years. Every report, every incident, every strange thing that happened. The government has the originals, filed away somewhere. They'll never see daylight. But I know what I saw. I know what happened to Andrew Karelian and Paul Kvasnikoff and all the others who disappeared. There are things in the Alaska wilderness that we don't understand. Things that were here long before we built our villages and canneries and post offices. Sometimes they tolerate us, sometimes they don't. The Postal Service taught me to be thorough, to document everything, to serve the public no matter what. I did my job in Portlock. I delivered the mail, kept the records, and served the community until the very end. But some places aren't meant for human civilization. Some places belong to something else. If you're ever flying over the Kenai Peninsula and you see the ruins of Portlock down there on the shore, remember what I've told you. Remember that the evacuation happened for a reason. And whatever drove us out of that village is probably still there, watching from the tree line, waiting to see if we're brave enough or foolish enough to come back. My name is Rebecca Chen, and I've been an insurance adjuster for 12 years. I work for Pacific Northwest Mutual, handling wilderness claims and outdoor recreation policies. I've seen everything: rock climbing accidents, kayaking disasters, hunting incidents that went wrong. I thought I understood risk. I thought I knew how people died in the wilderness. But what happened in March 2002 Alaska's Chugach State Park changed everything I thought I knew about death, about nature, and about the things that can call to us from the darkness. I'm telling this story because the official files are sealed, the case is still open, and because I need someone else to know what really happened out there, 35 miles northeast of Anchorage, where 5 people walked into the snow and became something else entirely. March 12, 2002. Tuesday morning. I was in my Seattle office when the call came in from Alaska State Troopers. 5 missing hikers. All of them had policies with us, group coverage through Seattle Outdoor Adventures. My supervisor, Frank Morrison, dropped the file on my desk like it was radioactive. Missing persons case, he said. Overdue by 4 days, you fly out tomorrow. The group leader was supposed to be me. Rebecca Chen, 34 years old, certified wilderness guide, insurance adjuster specializing in outdoor recreation claims. But this Rebecca Chen was someone else. A Seattle woman who'd taken 4 friends on a winter hiking trip to Alaska. I stared at the policy documents. Same name, same age, same profession. Different social security number. Frank, I said, this is weird. This woman has my exact name and job. Coincidence, he said. Happens more than you think. Just do your job. The flight to Anchorage was bumpy. I reviewed the case file during turbulence that made my coffee spill across the police reports. 5 hikers, Rebecca Chen, the other one, Mark Stevens, Lisa Rodriguez, Dave Kim, and Amy Walsh. All experienced outdoors people. All properly equipped. All carrying GPS devices and emergency beacons. Last contact was March 15th, a satellite phone call from Chen to her office. She'd reported clear weather, good spirits, camp established, everything normal, then nothing. I landed at Ted Stevens International Airport under gray skies that looked like they'd never seen sun. Alaska State Trooper Sergeant Mike Kowalski picked me up in a white Ford Explorer that smelled like coffee and resignation. "You're the insurance lady," he said. It wasn't a question. Rebecca Chen, Pacific Northwest Mutual. He gave me a look, same name as our missing person. I know. Strange coincidence. Yeah, his voice suggested he didn't believe in coincidences. We found their camp yesterday. You're gonna want to see this. The helicopter ride to the search site took 40 minutes. Below us, the Chugach Mountains stretched out like broken teeth against the sky. Sergeant Kowalski sat across from me, his radio crackling with updates from ground teams. Camp's at 3,200 feet, he shouted over the rotor noise. Everything's there. Everything except them. The pilot, a weathered man named Dave, turned back to us. Weather's been perfect all week. No storms, no whiteouts. Whatever happened, it wasn't the weather. We landed in a clearing about 100 yards from the campsite. I pulled on my heavy coat and followed Kowalski through knee-deep snow. The cold hit my face like a slap, making my eyes water. The camp looked like the hikers had just stepped away for a moment. 5 North Face tents stood in a perfect circle, guy lines tight, stakes secure. No wind damage, no collapsed sections. 2 Coleman camp stoves were still running, blue flames heating pots of what looked like soup. The soup was bubbling. "How long have those been burning?" I asked. We found them like this yesterday morning, Kowalski said. Still hot, fuel canisters should have run out days ago. I knelt beside the nearest tent. The zipper was closed properly. Inside, I could see sleeping bags laid out, personal items neatly arranged. Cameras, wallets, cell phones. Dave Kim's iPhone was still charging on a portable battery pack that should have died days ago. Where's their gear? I asked. That's the thing, Kowalski said. It's all here. Everything. Their backpacks, extra clothes, food, first aid kits, even their boots. He pointed to 5 pairs of hiking boots arranged neatly outside the tents. Expensive boots. Sorel caribou, designed for extreme cold. The kind of boots you don't take off when it's 15 degrees below zero. That's when I saw the footprints. They started at the edge of camp and led away into the trees. Bare feet. 5 sets of them, walking single file through snow that would have caused instant frostbite. The prints were clear, deep, perfectly formed. No stumbling. No signs of pain or hesitation. They walked out of here barefoot, I said. Gets worse, Kowalski said. Follow me. We followed the trail for about 200 yards. The prints were joined by a line of clothing. A jacket here, thermal underwear there, socks, sweaters. But the clothes weren't just discarded, they were cut. Clean cuts, like scissors or a knife had sliced through the fabric. Paradoxical undressing, I said. It happens in severe hypothermia. People feel overheated and start removing clothes. You're the expert, Kowalski said. But look at this. He pointed to a red fleece jacket hanging from a tree branch 8 feet off the ground. The fabric was shredded, but not by animals. The cuts were too clean, too deliberate, and there was no way someone could have thrown it that high. My radio crackled. Base to search, Team 1. We found something. Go ahead, Base. First body located. Grid 77 Alpha. Victim appears to be Rebecca Chen. I felt my stomach drop. It was like hearing about my own death. We found her 3 miles from camp, sitting against a massive spruce tree like she was just resting. She was fully clothed, jacket, boots, gloves, hat. Her eyes were closed. There were no signs of injury, no blood, no animal activity. She looked exactly like me, not similar, not close. Exactly like me. Same face, same hair, same height. Even the same scar on my left hand from a camping accident when I was 12. Jesus Christ, Kowalski whispered. You two could be twins. But we weren't twins. We were the same person. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the medical examiner, arrived an hour later. She took photos, measurements, checked for vital signs that weren't there. The body was cold but not frozen. In 15-degree weather, after being outside for 2 weeks, it should have been solid ice. Time of death is impossible to determine, Doctor, Martinez said. Body temperature suggests she died recently, maybe 6 hours ago. That's impossible, I said. She's been missing for 2 weeks. I'm just telling you what the thermometer says. While Dr. Martinez worked, I searched the immediate area. That's when I found the other Rebecca's, insurance adjuster certification in her jacket pocket. Same license number as mine. Same photo. Same signature. I was looking at my own ID on a dead woman who was me. My satellite phone rang. Frank Morrison's number. Rebecca, how's the investigation going? Frank, this is going to sound crazy, but... Rebecca, he interrupted. Where are you calling from? Alaska, the search site. You sent me here. Rebecca, you called in sick 3 days ago. You haven't been to work all week. The line went dead. I tried calling back. No signal. My GPS unit was showing my location as somewhere in northern Canada, 300 miles from where I was actually standing. My watch had stopped at 11:47 p.m., though it was clearly afternoon. Over the next 3 days, we found the other bodies. Mark Stevens was buried under 6 feet of snow in a perfect vertical shaft, like he'd been dropped from above. He was curled in the fetal position, hands pressed over his ears. The autopsy showed no signs of digging, no shovel marks. The snow above him was undisturbed, as if it had fallen naturally around his body. Lisa Rodriguez was 8 miles away in the opposite direction. She was holding her camera, fingers frozen around the viewfinder. When we developed the film, the final photos showed her teammates walking away from her into complete darkness. But they weren't walking on snow, The ground in the photos was bare earth, like it was summer. The timestamp on the photos showed they were taken after her official time of death. Dave, Kim, and Amy Walsh were found together in a natural cave, lying side by side like they were sleeping. They were holding hands. Both were fully dressed and showed no signs of injury or struggle. But the cave was above the tree line, in an area that had been searched multiple times. Rangers swore it hadn't been there before. All 5 victims died of hypothermia, according to the autopsies. But the timeline made no sense. Blood work showed they'd been eating and drinking normally up until their deaths. Their stomachs contained food from the camp, the same soup that was still cooking when we found the site. Every night, I stayed in the Anchorage motel and tried to make sense of the evidence. I called Pacific Northwest Mutual repeatedly, but they kept telling me I was on sick leave, that I hadn't been assigned to any Alaska case. When I insisted, they transferred me to HR, who had no record of any Rebecca Chen working there. My company credit cards stopped working. My insurance license lookup came back as no such person. According to every database I could access, Rebecca Chen, the insurance adjuster, didn't exist. But I was her. I had her memories, her skills, her knowledge. I knew policy numbers, claim, procedures, company protocols that only someone with 12 years of experience would know. On the 4th night, I was reviewing the case files when my motel room phone rang. "Hello, Rebecca?" It was my own voice. "Who is this?" "You know who this is. We need to talk." "Where are you?" "Where I've always been, where you're supposed to be." The line went dead. I looked out my motel window. In the parking lot, a woman stood under the streetlight. She was wearing my clothes, the same jacket I'd worn to Alaska, the same boots, the same knit cap. She raised her hand and waved. It was me. The other me. The dead me. She pointed toward the mountains. I drove back to the search site at midnight. My rental car's GPS kept recalculating the route, sending me down roads that didn't exist on any map. But somehow, I knew where to go. Like I'd driven this path 100 times before. The camp was dark when I arrived. The stoves had finally stopped burning. The tents stood silent in the moonlight, their bright colors now gray and ghostly. I walked to the edge of the campsite, where the footprints began. They were still there, clear as the day we'd found them. But now there was a 6th set. My boots, with their distinctive tread pattern, leading away into the trees. I followed the trail. The forest was absolutely silent. No wind, no animal sounds, no creaking branches. My footsteps were the only noise, crunching through snow that seemed to glow with its own light. The temperature should have been well below 0, but I felt warm. Too warm. After half a mile, I found them. All 5 hikers stood in a clearing, exactly as they'd looked in life. Rebecca, Mark, Lisa, Dave, and Amy. They were facing away from me, looking toward something I couldn't see. Their clothes were intact, no longer cut or scattered. They stood perfectly still, like they were waiting. "Rebecca," the other Rebecca said without turning around. "You're finally here." "What is this?" I asked. "What it's always been. What it needs to be." She turned to face me. Her eyes were completely white, like cataracts, but somehow I knew she could see me perfectly. "The mountains need guides," she said. "People who understand risk, who can help others make the right choices. We're doing important work here. You're dead. No. We're more than we were before. We help people find their way. Sometimes that means bringing them home. Sometimes it means bringing them here." Mark Stevens turned around next. His face was pale but peaceful. "It's not so bad, Rebecca. The cold doesn't hurt after a while. And the work is meaningful." "What work?" Lisa Rodriguez spoke without turning. "Every year, hundreds of people get lost in these mountains. Most of them die alone, confused, scared. We make sure they don't have to face it alone. We guide them through the transition," Dave Kim added. "Help them understand what's happening. Make it easier." Amy Walsh finally turned. "The mountain called to us, Rebecca. It told us our real names, our real purpose. You've been using a borrowed identity all your life. Your real name is here, written in the ice." "I'm an insurance adjuster," I said. "I have a job, a life, people who—" "No," the other Rebecca said. "You have a role you've been playing. But roles end. This is who you really are." She pointed to the ground at my feet. In the snow, letters were forming. Not carved or written, but growing from the ice itself, like crystal formations. Rebecca Chen, guide, Chugach Mountains, eternal. The others who hired you don't even remember you exist, she said. Because you don't. Not in that world. You belong here, with us, with the work that matters. I felt the pull then, like a tide going out, something inside me wanting to step forward, to join them, to understand what they understood. The warmth was spreading through my chest, making my jacket feel heavy and unnecessary. Just walk with us, Mark said. We'll show you where you need to go. They turned away again and started walking deeper into the forest. Their footsteps made no sound in the snow. I took a step forward. Then I thought about the case files, the inconsistencies, the impossible timeline. Whatever had happened to these people, it wasn't natural. It wasn't right. I pulled out my camera and started taking pictures. The flash illuminated the clearing, and for just a moment, I saw what they were really walking toward. A crack in the mountain. Not a cave, but a fissure in reality itself, leaking pale light that hurt to look at directly. Through the crack, I could see endless snow, endless night, and shapes moving in the distance that had never been human. The other Rebecca looked back at me one final time. "You can't go back now," she said. "You've seen too much. You are too much." But I was already running. I made it back to my car, but the keys wouldn't work. The engine wouldn't start. My cell phone had no signal. The GPS showed me in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. I started walking toward Anchorage, following the highway that led away from the mountains. It took 14 hours. 3 different people offered me rides. But when they looked at me, they said they thought I was someone else. They kept calling me by different names. When I finally reached town, I went straight to the police station. Sergeant Kowalski was there, but he didn't recognize me. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said. "I think you have me confused with someone else. I've never worked a missing persons case in the Chugach Mountains." The case files were gone. No record of Rebecca Chen or the other 4 hikers. No search operation, no helicopter flights. The motel where I'd stayed had no reservation under my name. I flew back to Seattle, but Pacific Northwest Mutual had never heard of me. My apartment had different tenants. My bank accounts didn't exist. According to every official record, Rebecca Chen had never been born. But I remembered everything. I still had my training, my knowledge, my 12 years of experience. I knew policy numbers that didn't exist, claim procedures for a company that had no record of me. I started over. New name, new identity, new life. I became Sarah Martinez, borrowed from the medical examiner who'd at least remembered meeting me. I got a job with a different insurance company, handling different types of claims. But every few months, I get calls. Wrong numbers, usually. People asking for Rebecca Chen. Insurance adjusters who need help with wilderness claims. Companies that want to hire someone with my exact qualifications. And sometimes, late at night, I get calls from Alaska. The voice on the other end is always mine, asking when I'm coming home. I never answer those calls anymore. But I keep my bags packed, just in case. Because somewhere in the Chugach Mountains, there's still work to be done. And I'm starting to remember that some jobs, once you accept them, never really end. The case file is still open. The 5 hikers are still listed as missing persons, though no one remembers looking for them. And somewhere in those mountains, they're still walking through the snow, helping other lost souls find their way to whatever waits beyond the crack in the world. I just hope, when my time comes, I'll have the strength to refuse the call one more time. But the mountains are patient, and winter in Alaska lasts a very long time. My name is Frank Kowalski, and I've been running heavy equipment for 23 years. Started when I was 19, right out of high school in Detroit. My dad taught me everything. How to read the ground, feel the machine, know when something's not right just by the sound of the engine. I've moved more dirt than most people see in their lifetime. Cleared forests in Oregon, built highways in Montana, dug foundations for skyscrapers in Chicago. I thought I'd seen everything the earth could throw at me. But what happened in July 1975, 60 miles south of Fairbanks, Alaska, changed everything I thought I knew about what's buried under our feet. I was part of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline Project, -D, the biggest construction job in American history. 800 miles of pipe carrying oil from Prudhoe Bay to Valdez. They needed the best equipment operators they could find, and the pay was incredible. 3 times what I made back home, plus overtime that never seemed to end. The work was brutal, 18-hour days in conditions that would break most men. But I loved it. Just me, my Cat D9 bulldozer, and thousands of square miles of untouched wilderness. The Alaska I worked in wasn't the postcard version people imagine. This was raw, dangerous country. Temperatures that could freeze your spit before it hit the ground. Ground so hard in winter that our blades would spark off the permafrost like hitting concrete. And in summer, when the top layer thawed, everything turned into a muddy soup that could swallow a truck whole. Our crew was building Pump Station 8, one of 12 stations that would push oil through the pipeline. Each station was like a small factory, massive buildings housing pumps bigger than train engines, control rooms full of computers, living quarters for the operators. But before any of that could happen, we had to clear and level the ground. That's where I came in. July 15th, 1975. I remember the date because it was my wife's birthday, and I was supposed to call her that evening. The weather was perfect for Alaska, about 60 degrees, clear skies, just enough breeze to keep the mosquitoes manageable. I'd been working the same grid pattern for 3 days, clearing trees and scraping down to solid ground for the foundation. My D9 was purring, like always. That machine was my partner. I knew every sound she made, every vibration through the seat. When the blade hit rock, I felt it in my bones. When the track started to slip, I sensed it before the gauges showed anything. We worked together like dancers. That's why I knew something was wrong the moment my blade hit that thing. It was about 10 in the morning. I was making my usual pass, pushing a load of stumps and debris toward the dump pile. The blade was down about 3 feet, scraping through what should have been normal subsoil. Then I felt it, a metallic clang that rang through the whole machine like hitting a bell. I stopped immediately and backed up. In 20 years of digging, you learn to tell the difference between hitting bedrock, an old cable, or a piece of junk someone buried. This was none of those things. The sound was too clean, too hollow, like hitting something that wasn't supposed to be there. I climbed down from the cab to take a look. The blade had scraped a long groove in the dirt, and at the bottom, I could see something dark reflecting the sunlight. Not the dull gleam of rusty metal or the rough texture of stone. This was smooth, almost like black glass, but clearly artificial. I radioed my supervisor, Jake Morrison. "Hey Jake, I got something weird here at grid 7-7. Think you better come take a look." Jake arrived in his pickup about 10 minutes later with Bill Chen, our site engineer. Both of them had been in construction longer than me and had seen everything. But when they looked at what my blade had uncovered, they got real quiet real fast. "What the hell is that?" Bill said, kneeling down for a closer look. The exposed surface was about 6 feet long and perfectly smooth. It was made of some kind of black metal I'd never seen before, not steel, not aluminum, not anything familiar. And carved into the surface were symbols, not random scratches or natural patterns, but deliberate markings that looked almost like writing. "Frank, keep digging around it," Jake said, "but be careful. Let's see how big this thing is." For the next 2 hours, I carefully scraped away dirt and rock, expanding the excavation in all directions. The more we uncovered, the stranger it got. The metal structure was huge, at least 30 feet by 20 feet for the visible portion. But it kept going down. Every time I thought I'd found the bottom, there was more. And the symbols were everywhere, not just random marks, but organized patterns that covered every inch of the surface. Some looked almost like animals, but wrong somehow. Others were geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly, like they were bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. "I'm calling the main office," Jake said around noon. "This is way above my pay grade." By 3 o'clock, the site was crawling with people in suits. Not construction people, sorry. These were government types with badges and briefcases who wouldn't tell us their names. They set up a perimeter around my excavation and started taking photographs and measurements with equipment I didn't recognize. One of them, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, approached me while I was cleaning mud off my blade. "Mr. Kowalski, we need you to continue excavating, but you'll be working with our team now. And I need you to understand, I have to LT. Nothing you see or hear today can be discussed with anyone. National security." National security? I was just digging a foundation for a pump station. But the man's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. For the next 4 days, I worked under constant supervision. The excavation grew deeper and wider as we uncovered more of the structure. It wasn't just one building, it was an entire complex of interconnected chambers and corridors, all made from the same impossible black metal. On the 3rd day, we found an opening. It was a doorway, or what looked like one. About 7 feet tall and perfectly rectangular, it led into darkness that our floodlights couldn't penetrate. The government people brought in more equipment, sensors and cameras and things that beeped and clicked constantly. "We're going in," the thin man announced. "Mr. Kowalski, we need your bulldozer to clear a path to that entrance." I positioned my D9 as close as possible and kept the engine running while they explored. Even from 50 feet away, I could hear their voices echoing from inside the structure. They sounded excited at first, then worried, then scared. When they came out 2 hours later, their faces were white as sheets. "What's down there?" I asked Jake, who'd been allowed to observe from the perimeter. "Don't know," he said, but his hands were shaking as he lit a cigarette. "They won't tell us anything, but I heard one of them on the radio talking about pre-human civilization and impossible carbon dating results." That night, military trucks arrived. Real army vehicles with soldiers who didn't talk to anybody. They unloaded crates of equipment and set up a command post that looked like something out of a war movie. The thin man found me the next morning as I was checking my machine. "Mr. Kowalski, we're changing the work plan. We need you to fill in the excavation. All of it. Completely." "Fill it in? After all this work to uncover it?" "National security," he said again. "You'll be well compensated for your discretion." For the next 3 days, I worked in reverse. Instead of digging, I was burying. Truckload after truckload of concrete was poured into the excavation. They sealed that ancient structure like it was radioactive waste. By the time we finished, there was no trace that anything unusual had ever been found. Pump Station 8 was built exactly as planned, right on top of where the structure had been. The pumps went online in September, and oil started flowing through the pipeline. Everything appeared normal, but it wasn't normal. Not even close. The first worker disappeared in October. Jimmy Martinez, an equipment operator like me. They said he fell into the Tanana River during a routine maintenance check. Never found the body. The second was Paul Nelson in December. Heart attack, they claimed, even though Paul was 28 years old and in perfect health. By spring of 1976, 7 men had disappeared or died at Pump Station 8. All of them had worked on the construction crew. All of them knew what we'd found. I started asking questions, but nobody wanted to talk. The official reports blamed industrial accidents, bears, workers quitting without notice. But I knew the truth. I'd seen what was down there. The photographs I'd secretly taken with my personal camera showed things that shouldn't exist. Carvings of creatures that looked like combinations of animals and humans. Symbols that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. And in the deepest chamber we'd uncovered, piles of bones that weren't from any animals in the textbooks. When I tried to show the photos to my wife, they were gone. Someone had broken into my trailer and taken them, along with my journals and any other evidence I'd collected. That's when I knew they were watching me. I kept working the pipeline for 2 more years, but I never felt safe. Every shadow could hide someone waiting to make me disappear like the others. Every phone call could be the one that ended with an accident on the job site. In 1978, I finally got my chance to tell the truth. A congressional subcommittee was investigating safety problems on the pipeline, and I contacted them through my union representative. They granted me immunity and protection in exchange for my testimony. But even sitting in that hearing room in Washington, D.C., surrounded by congressmen and FBI agents, I could feel them watching. The thin man with wire-rimmed glasses sat in the back row, taking notes and staring at me with cold, dead eyes. I told them everything. The discovery, the cover-up, the disappearances. I showed them copies of my photos that I'd hidden in a safety deposit box. I gave them names, dates, and evidence they couldn't ignore. The subcommittee ordered an immediate investigation of Pump Station 8. For 3 weeks, I thought justice might actually be served. Then the National Security Act came down like a hammer. Everything was classified. The investigation was sealed. My testimony was buried so deep it might as well have never happened. And Pump Station 8 kept operating like nothing had ever been wrong. But the disappearances continued. 23 workers in the past 3 years, according to my contacts still working the pipeline. The company instituted a new policy. No one works at Station 8 for more than 30 days. They call it rotation for employee wellness. I call it damage control. I'm retired now, living in a small town in Montana where nobody knows my name or my story. But I still wake up some nights, thinking about what we buried under all that concrete. Whatever was down there had been waiting in the darkness for thousands of years. And now we'd built a massive industrial facility right on top of it, pumping millions of gallons of oil through pipes that run directly over its resting place. Sometimes I wonder if sealing it up was enough, or if something that old and patient might find other ways to reach the surface. The pipeline still runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The oil keeps flowing and the money keeps coming. But if you ever find yourself working at Pump Station 8, remember my story. Don't to stay longer than 30 days. Don't ask questions about the foundation. And if you hear anything strange coming from below the pumps late at night, just remember, some things are better left buried. Because the earth remembers everything we put in it. And sometimes it gives things back. My name is Captain Mike Russo, and I've been running charter fishing boats on Alaska's lakes for 15 years. Started when I was 25, fresh out of the Coast Guard, with nothing but a dream and a beat-up boat my dad left me. Built my business one client at a time, learned every inch of these waters, every seasonal pattern of the fish. I've guided everyone from Hollywood celebrities to small-town dentists looking for the catch of a lifetime. Lake Iliamna has been my home, my office, my life. It's the biggest lake in Alaska, over 1,000 square miles of deep, cold water surrounded by mountains that touch the sky. In 15 years, I've seen storms that could flip a truck, ice thick enough to walk on, and fish bigger than most people. I've pulled tourists out of the water when they fell overboard, fixed engines in the middle of nowhere, and guided boats through fog so thick you couldn't see your own hand. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened on August 12, 2019. What I saw that day made me question everything I thought I knew about the lake I called home. The thing that lives in Lake Iliamna isn't just a fish, it's something else entirely. August 12th started like any other summer day. Clear skies, light breeze, perfect conditions for rainbow trout fishing. My client was Dr. Sarah Kim, a dentist from Seattle who'd booked a full-day trip through my website. Nice lady, first time in Alaska, excited about everything. She showed up at the dock in Chugach at 6 a.m. sharp with brand new fishing gear and a smile that could light up the whole village. My boat is a 28-foot Kingfisher with twin outboards, fish finder, GPS, radio, all the standard equipment you need for serious fishing. I've had her for 8 years, maintained every bolt and wire myself. She's not pretty, but she's solid and reliable. The hull is aluminum, thick enough to handle the occasional bump against a dock or a piece of floating wood. We headed out around 6:30, motoring slowly past the sleeping village. The lake was glass smooth that morning, reflecting the mountains like a perfect mirror. Dr. Kim was amazed by the size of it all. Most people from the lower 48 don't realize how big Alaska really is. Lake Iliamna stretches beyond the horizon in every direction, so large you can't see across it on a clear day. I took her to my favorite spot about 8 miles out from Chugach, where an underwater ridge creates perfect habitat for big rainbows. The fish finder showed exactly what I expected. NC9, scattered marks in 60 feet of water, with a few larger signatures that could be trophy fish. We set up our trolling spread with flashers and eggs, and I put the boat in a slow troll pattern. For 3 hours, everything was perfect. Dr. Kim caught 4 nice rainbows, each one bigger than anything she'd ever seen. We were laughing, taking pictures, having exactly the kind of day that makes people book return trips. The radio chattered occasionally with other guides checking in, comparing notes on where the fish were biting. Nothing unusual at all. Then around 9:30, my fish finder started acting strange. At first, I thought it was just interference. The screen showed a massive return directly below us, something huge moving up from deep water. But the signal was weird. Fuzzy around the edges, like the sonar couldn't get a clean reading. I tapped the screen, checked the settings, even turned it off and back on. Same thing. According to the display, There was something the size of a school bus swimming underneath my boat. "What's that big mark?" "Doctor," Kim asked, pointing at the screen. "Probably just a school of salmon," I said, but I didn't believe it. Salmon don't swim alone, and they don't show up as one solid mass like that. Plus, the signature was moving too fast. The display showed it doing at least 40 miles per hour underwater. No fish moves that fast. I tried raising other guides on the radio. "Any of prize? You guys seeing large fish returns out here?" Static. I checked the radio. Full power, antenna, solid. Tried again. Nothing but dead air. That's when the water around our boat started getting weird. Dr. Kim noticed it first. "Is the water supposed to move like that?" I looked over the side and felt my stomach drop. The lake around us was perfectly calm, but in a circle about 50 feet wide, the water was shifting. Not waves exactly, but like something massive was moving just under the surface, displacing the water from below. It reminded me of watching a submarine surface, except there was nothing breaking the water. My depth finder was going crazy now, showing readings that made no sense. The bottom kept changing, 60 feet, 80 feet, 120 feet, then back to 60. Like the lake floor was moving up and down. I've never seen anything like it, and I've been reading sonar for 15 years. "Maybe we should head back," Dr. Kim said quietly. I was about to agree when something hit us from underneath. The impact lifted the entire bow of my boat out of the water. Dr. Kim screamed and grabbed the nearest railing. I was thrown against the steering wheel so hard I saw stars. The boat crashed back down with a splash that soaked us both, and immediately I could hear water rushing in somewhere. "What the hell was that?" Dr. Kim shouted. I honestly didn't know. In 15 years of guiding, I'd never had anything hit my boat from below. Logs float on the surface, rocks don't move, and we were in 60 feet of water anyway. Nothing on the bottom could reach us. I grabbed my flashlight and checked the hull. What I saw made my blood turn cold. The starboard side of my boat had 4 parallel gashes, each about 6 feet long and 8 inches deep. They cut through the aluminum like a hot knife through butter, perfectly spaced like claw marks. But these weren't scratches. They were gouges, torn metal, curled outward like something had grabbed the boat and tried to rip it apart. Water was pouring in through the largest gash. I grabbed every towel and tarp I had, stuffing them into the holes while Dr. Kim worked the bilge pump. The boat was taking on water fast, but we weren't sinking yet. "We need to get to shore," I told her, trying to keep my voice steady. I started both engines and turned toward Chugach, but we'd only gone about 100 yards when it hit us again. This time I was ready for the impact, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. As the boat lurched upward, something broke the surface right next to us. A head, the size of a small car. It rose out of the water not 10 feet from Dr. Kim's side of the boat, dripping and massive and absolutely impossible. The head was elongated like a crocodile's, but 3 times larger than any croc that ever lived. Rows of teeth the size of dinner plates, each one curved and sharp enough to slice through steel, and the eyes, dark, intelligent eyes that looked right at us with an awareness that made my skin crawl. "Doctor!" Kim screamed. I gunned both engines, but the thing moved with us, keeping pace effortlessly. It studied us for maybe 5 seconds that felt like hours, then slipped back underwater without a splash. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. Dr. Kim was crying, pointing at the water where the head had disappeared. "Did you see that? Did you see that thing?" I saw it. God help me, I saw it. The fish finder showed it following us, a massive return staying about 50 feet behind the boat. Every few seconds, the signal would vanish, then reappear somewhere else, sometimes ahead of us, sometimes to the side. Whatever this thing was, it was fast and smart and seemed to be toying with us. I tried the radio again. Still nothing but static. Grabbed my cell phone, no signal, which wasn't unusual out here, but the phone itself was acting strange. The screen kept flickering between my phone, normal display, and something that looked like sonar readings. Depth numbers scrolling past, coordinates that didn't match our position. "It's following us, Doctor," Kim whispered, staring at the fish finder. She was right. The massive return stayed with us as we limped toward shore, sometimes disappearing for a few minutes, then popping up closer than before. I pushed the engines as hard as I dared, but with the hull damage, I couldn't risk going too fast or we'd take on even more water. That's when I noticed the scales. Embedded in the torn aluminum around the largest gash were what looked like scales, each one the size of a dinner plate. They were dark green with an oily sheen, thick as my thumb, and harder than any fish scale I'd ever seen. When I tried to pry one loose with my knife, the blade bent. "Doctor." Kim was staring at them too. "Those aren't from any fish," she said. I knew she was right, but I didn't want to admit it. 15 years on this lake, and I'd never seen anything like this. The local Yupik people had stories, sure. They called it Ili, some kind of monster that lived in the deep parts of the lake. But I'd always figured those were just old legends, stories to scare kids. Looking at those scales, I wasn't so sure anymore. We were about 2 miles from shore when it surfaced again, this time directly in front of us. I cut the engines and we coasted to a stop, both of us too scared to move. The thing was enormous. What I'd thought was just a head was attached to a neck as thick as a telephone pole. As it rose higher out of the water, I could see massive shoulders covered in those same dark scales. The body disappeared into the depths, but based on what was visible, this thing had to be at least 40 feet long. It looked at us again with those intelligent eyes, then opened its mouth. The sound it made wasn't a roar or a growl. It was deeper than that, a vibration that seemed to come from the water itself. I felt it in my chest, in my bones. Dr. Kim covered her ears and doubled over. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it dove. The massive tail that broke the surface as it went down was wider than my boat is long, covered in spines that could have gutted us like a fish. The splash when it hit the water rocked us so hard I thought we were going to capsize. I fired up the engines and pushed them to maximum throttle, hull damage be damned. Water was pouring in faster now, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get us out of there. The thing followed us all the way to shore. I could see it on the fish finder, sometimes racing ahead of us, sometimes falling behind like it was escorting us home or hurting us. It never broke the surface again, but I knew it was there. We made it to the Chugach dock with about 6 inches of freeboard left. I'd never been so happy to see dry land in my life. Dr. Kim's legs were shaking so badly she could barely climb out of the boat. Mine weren't much better. I called the Alaska Fish and Game office in Dillingham as soon as we got to shore. Ranger David Chen drove out that same evening to take our statements and examine the boat. He measured the gashes, photographed the scales, and listened to our story with the kind of professional patience that told me he'd heard similar things before. "Any idea what could have caused this?" I asked him. Chen just shook his head. "I've seen bear attacks on boats, moose damage, even a few cases where large logs punched holes in hulls. But nothing like this." He sent photos of the scales to a marine biologist at the University of Alaska. Dr. James Reed called me 3 days later with results that made no sense. "The scale structure doesn't match any known fish species in Alaska," he told me. "The protein composition is similar to shark scales, but the size and thickness are completely outside normal parameters. We'd need more samples for a definitive analysis." I wasn't about to go, looking for more samples. The story got out, of course. Small communities like Chugach don't keep secrets well. Within a week, I had reporters calling, cryptozoologists wanting to charter boats, and tourists asking if they could see the monster. I stopped taking calls. Mary Delkitty, a Yupik elder from the village, came to see me a few days after the attack. She examined the damage to my boat and nodded like she'd expected it. "Ili has been angry lately," she told me. "The mining company up north has been blasting near the lake. All that noise and vibration disturbs the deep places where she sleeps." "She?" I asked. "The mother?" "There are smaller ones too, but she's the old one. Been in the lake since before my grandmother's time. Usually she leaves people alone, but when she's angry." Mary gestured at my damaged boat. I asked her if she'd ever seen it. Mary was quiet for a long time. "Once," she said finally, "when I was 12, fishing with my father. She came up next to our kayak, looked at us, then went back down. My father said she was just curious, but he never took that route again. That was 3 months ago. I've barely been out on the lake since. When I do take clients fishing, I stick to the shallow areas near shore, places where the water is too narrow for something that size to maneuver. My business has dropped off about 60%. Word travels fast in the charter fishing community, and most guides think I'm either lying or crazy. The Alaska Fish and Game Department officially closed the deep water areas of Lake Iliamna to commercial fishing pending their investigation. They cite unusual marine activity in their reports, but everyone knows what they really mean. Dr. Kim sent me a Christmas card this year. She's doing well, back to her practice in Seattle, but she said she still has nightmares about those eyes looking at her. Sometimes she wakes up thinking she can hear that deep, bone-shaking call. I know exactly what she means. I still live in Chugach, still run my boat when clients book trips. But I've installed additional fish finders, upgraded my radio equipment, and always carry extra emergency gear. And I never go out to that 8-mile mark anymore. The thing is, I've started noticing patterns. Local fishermen have reported more strange sonar readings over the past year. Boats coming back with unexplained damage. And according to Mary Del Kitty, the mining company has expanded their blasting operations. Whatever lives in the deep parts of Lake Iliamna, it's not happy about the changes. And something tells me what happened to Dr. Kim and me was just a warning. The lake looks peaceful from shore. The blue water stretching to the mountains, eagles circling overhead, everything calm and beautiful. But I know what's down there now. In the deepest parts, where the water turns black and the sonar can't find bottom, something ancient is watching and waiting. And sometimes, on really quiet mornings when the lake is perfectly still, I swear I can see ripples moving across the surface in patterns too regular to be wind. Like something massive is swimming just beneath, checking to see if anyone's brave enough to venture out to the deep water. I'm not that brave anymore. My name is James Martinez, and I was a petty officer in the U.S. Navy for 12 years. I spent most of that time working base security at different naval stations across the country. I've handled everything from drunk sailors trying to sneak back on base to actual security threats during wartime. I thought I'd seen it all. But what happened at Adak Naval Air Station in Alaska during the fall and winter of 2001 changed everything I thought I knew about what's really out there in the dark. I need to tell someone this story. The official reports are all classified, and most of the guys who were there with me won't talk about it anymore. But I can't keep this inside any longer. Adak Island is about as far from civilization as you can get while still being in the United States. It's way out in the Aleutian Islands, nothing but cold ocean and wind for hundreds of miles in every direction. The Naval Air Station there housed about 300 personnel, mostly maintenance crews and pilots. My job was to run the security detail, 1 CU, 12 guards total, working shifts around the clock to keep the base safe. The base itself wasn't huge, but it was important. We had runway facilities for naval aircraft, maintenance hangars, barracks for personnel, and all the usual military infrastructure. The whole thing was surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire, with motion sensors and cameras covering the perimeter. Standard setup for a military installation. I'd been there since August 2001, and everything was running smooth until September. The weather was starting to turn cold, which meant long, dark nights were coming. But that's normal for Alaska. What wasn't normal was what started happening on September 15th. I was doing my morning perimeter check when I found the first one, a perfect circular hole in the ground right next to the fence line on the northeast side of the base, 4 feet across, perfectly round, going straight down into the earth. I shined my flashlight down there, but the beam just disappeared into darkness. Had to be at least 20 feet deep, maybe more. The weird part was the edges. They were smooth, like someone had used some kind of industrial drill. But there was no excavated dirt anywhere around it, no machinery tracks, no footprints, nothing. Just this perfect hole that definitely wasn't there the day before. I radioed it in to the base commander, Captain Williams. He came out to look at it himself, brought the base engineer with him. None of us could figure out what would make a hole like that. The engineer said it would take specialized equipment to dig something that clean and straight. Maybe it's some kind of geological thing, Captain Williams said, but he didn't sound convinced. Some kind of sinkhole or underground collapse. We filled out a report and moved on. Alaska's got weird geology, so maybe it really was just some natural thing. But 3 days later, there was another hole. Same size, same perfect shape, about 50 yards from the first one. Then another one 4 days after that. By early October, we had 6 holes scattered around the base perimeter. Always the same, 4 feet across, straight down, no excavated soil. And they kept appearing every 3 or 4 days, always at night, always when no one was watching. Captain Williams ordered me to set up surveillance. We installed motion sensors around the perimeter and positioned cameras to cover the areas where the holes had been appearing. If someone or something was digging these holes, we were going to catch them in the act. I handpicked the night shift crew and briefed them personally. Seaman Rodriguez, who'd been on base security for 3 years. Petty Officer Chen, one of my most reliable guys. And Seaman Jackson, young but sharp and eager to prove himself. Good men, all of them. The first night with the new surveillance setup was October 2nd. Nothing happened. Same with the second night. But on October 3rd, everything went wrong. I was in the security office reviewing the camera feeds from the previous night when I noticed something strange. Around 2:47 a.m., there was movement on camera 7, which covered the northeast section where most of the holes had appeared. But it wasn't movement above ground. The motion sensors had triggered, but not from anything we could see on the surface. The camera showed the ground itself shifting, like something was moving underneath it. Then, suddenly, the camera feed went dead. Static. I checked the motion sensor data. It showed rapid movement heading in a straight line underground, right toward the base. Whatever it was, it had cut right through the sensor cables buried 3 feet down. When I went out to check the area that morning, I found a new hole. This one was different, though. It wasn't at the perimeter. It was inside the fence line, maybe 30 yards from the main barracks. And there was something else. Camera 7's cable had been severed cleanly, like someone had taken a pair of industrial bolt cutters to it. But the cable was buried underground, and there was no sign that anyone had dug down to reach it. Rodriguez was scheduled for the midnight to 6 shift on October 18th. He was supposed to check in by radio every hour, standard procedure. At 1 a.m., he checked in from Sector 3. At 2 a.m., Sector 5, normal routine patrol. At 3 a.m., nothing. I tried raising him on the radio, no response. Tried his cell phone, straight to voicemail. By 3:30, I was getting worried. Rodriguez was one of my most reliable guys. He'd never missed a check-in before. I organized a search team and we started looking for him. They found his patrol route pretty easily. He'd been following standard procedure, checking the fence line and the new holes we'd discovered. But when we got to the hole near the barracks, we found his flashlight and radio at the bottom. 30 feet down in that dark hole, sitting on what looked like solid rock. We lowered a camera down on a cable to get a better look. The hole went deeper than we thought. Our camera cable ran out at 60 feet and we still hadn't hit bottom. But what we could see was impossible. The hole didn't just go straight down. About 40 feet down, it opened up into tunnels, horizontal passages leading off in different directions, like some kind of underground network. The camera picked up at least 3 separate tunnel entrances, all perfectly round, all the same 4-foot diameter as the holes above ground. Rodriguez was nowhere to be seen. Captain Williams called in a specialist team from Anchorage to help with the search. They brought better equipment, longer camera cables, sonar mapping gear, the works. What they found under our base was impossible to explain. The tunnel network was huge, miles of perfectly round passages, all exactly 4 feet in diameter, running in a complex pattern underneath the entire base. Some tunnels were shallow, maybe 20 feet down. Others went much deeper. The sonar couldn't find the bottom of some of them. But here's the thing that really scared us. The tunnels weren't random. They formed a pattern, like a grid or a web, with larger chamber areas where multiple tunnels connected. And they were old, not newly dug. The rock walls were smooth and weathered, like water had been flowing through them for years. This doesn't make geological sense, the specialist team leader told Captain Williams. Natural cave systems don't form patterns like this, and the diameter is too consistent. This looks almost like what? The captain asked. Like something made them. Something that needed exactly 4 feet of clearance to move through. While the search for Rodriguez continued, other weird things started happening on base. Maria Santos, our head cook, came to me with a problem. Food was disappearing from the kitchen freezers. Not just a little bit, she said. Hundreds of pounds of meat, beef, pork, even the frozen fish we get flown in. Someone's breaking into the freezers at night and taking everything. I checked the kitchen security. The freezers were locked tight, and there was no sign of forced entry. No broken locks, no jimmied doors. But every morning, more food was gone. We set up a camera in the kitchen. The next night, we caught something on tape, but it didn't make any sense. Around 3 a.m., the camera showed movement near the ceiling. Something large moving through the ventilation system. But our vents were only about 2 feet square. Nothing that size should have been able to fit through them. The shape on the camera was hard to make out. Long and dark, maybe 8 or 9 feet from end to end. It moved through the vents like it knew exactly where it was going, heading straight for the kitchen area. Then the camera went to static, just like the outdoor cameras had been doing. In the morning, another 200 pounds of meat was gone, and we found something else. The ventilation grate above the main freezer had been pushed out from the inside. Not broken, just carefully moved aside and then put back in place. By November, the base was running on edge. We'd lost Rodriguez, food was disappearing nightly, and strange sounds were coming from inside the walls and floors. Scratching, scraping noises that moved from room to room, always just out of sight. Then the power started going out. It began with small outages, lights flickering in individual buildings, equipment shutting down for a few seconds at a time. But it got worse. Whole sections of the base would go dark for hours. The base engineer couldn't figure out what was causing it. When we finally traced one of the outages to its source, we found something that made no sense. The main electrical cable running to Barracks C had been severed. Not cut with tools, the cable looked like it had been bitten through. Like something with massive teeth had chomped right through 6 inches of armored electrical cable. What kind of animal has teeth that could do this? The engineer asked me. I didn't have an answer. There were no animals on Adak Island big enough to bite through electrical cables. The biggest thing on the island was supposed to be foxes. On December 1st, we lost 3 more people. Petty Officer Chen and Seaman Jackson were doing a routine patrol of the perimeter. Standard 2-man team, radio check-ins every 30 minutes. At 11:30 p.m., they reported from Sector 7. Everything normal. At midnight, nothing. The search teams found their radios and flashlights at the bottom of one of the holes, just like Rodriguez. But this time, we also found something else. Scratch marks on the walls of the tunnel, about 15 feet down. Deep gouges in the rock, like claw marks. But they were huge, easily 6 inches long and carved deep into solid stone. We also lost Seaman Williams that same night. He was on duty in the communications center and just vanished. No radio call, no sign of struggle. His coffee was still warm when we found his post empty. The only thing out of place was a ventilation grate that had been pushed aside above his desk. Captain Williams had seen enough. On December 5th, he ordered a partial evacuation of the base. All non-essential personnel were to be transferred out immediately. Only critical operations staff and security would remain. But the Navy brass weren't happy about it. Abandoning a strategic military installation based on unexplained disappearances and equipment malfunctions wasn't going to look good in anyone's service record. They wanted concrete answers, so we stayed. Those of us who remained kept the base running while the investigation continued, but we all knew something was hunting us. Something that lived in those tunnels beneath our feet and came up at night to take our people. We started traveling in groups of 3 or more. Never alone, never unarmed. We sealed off as many of the holes as we could find, pouring concrete down them and covering them with steel plates. But new ones kept appearing. The scratching sounds got worse. Every night, we could hear something moving through the walls and floors. Sometimes it sounded like it was right underneath us. Sometimes it seemed to be circling the buildings, testing for weak points. On January 15th, 2002, the whole tunnel system collapsed. I was on duty in the security office when it started. A low rumbling sound, like distant thunder. But it went on and on, getting louder. The whole building started shaking. Coffee cups fell off desks, and the lights flickered. Then the ground outside started sinking, not in one place, everywhere. The entire base compound was dropping into the earth as the tunnel network underneath collapsed. We evacuated everyone to the runway, which was on higher ground and seemed stable. When the shaking stopped, there was a massive crater where the main base had been. maybe 100 yards across and 50 feet deep, and at the bottom, we could see into what had been the creature's lair. It was a cavern, huge, much bigger than anything our sonar had detected, and it was full of bones. Not human bones, at least not all of them. There were animal bones, fish bones, things I couldn't identify. Some of them looked ancient, like they'd been there for decades or longer, and scattered among them were more recent additions. Personal items from our missing personnel, pieces of equipment, torn clothing, but no bodies. Whatever had been taking our people hadn't left them down there. The specialist team that came in after the collapse found something else in the cavern. Bones from something that definitely wasn't human. Long, curved things that might have been ribs. A skull that was wrong in every way. Too long, too narrow, with tooth sockets big enough to hold the 6-inch fangs we'd been finding marks from. The marine biologists they brought in couldn't identify the species. Nothing like this exists in any known taxonomy, one of them told me. The bone structure suggests something that could move both on land and in water, something adapted for digging through rock and earth. But the size? We're talking about something at least 30 feet long. They took samples, ran tests, filed reports, all classified, all buried in some Pentagon filing system where no one would ever see them again. Adak Naval Air Station was officially decommissioned in February 2002. The official reason was budget cuts and strategic repositioning. The base was too expensive to maintain for its strategic value, they said. Made perfect sense on paper. The truth was that nobody wanted to rebuild a military installation on top of an underground lair that had housed some kind of massive predator for who knows how long. The risk was too great, the cost too high. The island is still a restricted military zone. Officially, it's for environmental protection, USE, preserving wildlife habitats and cleaning up old military contamination. But I know the real reason. They don't want anyone else to end up like Rodriguez, Chen, Jackson, and Williams. I was transferred to a base in California after Adak closed. Got a commendation for my service during the difficult circumstances of the base closure. My file mentions nothing about missing personnel or underground creatures. According to the Navy, Rodriguez and the others were transferred to other assignments. I finished my 20 years and retired in 2009, but I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, thinking I hear scratching sounds in the walls. My house is built on a concrete slab, no basement, no crawl space, but that doesn't stop the nightmares. I've tried to research what we might have encountered on Adak Island. There are legends among the Alok people about something they called the tunneler, a creature that lived beneath the earth and sea, emerging at night to hunt. The stories go back hundreds of years, long before any military base was built there. Maybe we should have listened to those stories. Maybe we should have known better than to build our base on top of something's ancient hunting ground. I don't know if that thing is still down there, or if it died when the tunnels collapsed. I don't know if there are others like it, somewhere else in those remote islands. But I do know one thing. There are places in this world where humans aren't supposed to go, and things living in the dark that are better left alone. If you ever find yourself stationed somewhere remote, somewhere isolated, and you start finding strange holes in the ground, leave. Don't try to investigate. Don't try to be a hero. Just pack your gear and get as far away as you can. Some mysteries are meant to stay buried. My name is Emma Chugach, and I've been managing the Chugach market in Utqiagvik for 12 years. That's Barrow to most people. The northernmost town in Alaska, where the sun doesn't rise for 2 months straight during winter. I started working here right after high school, stocking shelves and running the register. Worked my way up to assistant manager, then took over when old Pete retired. Managing a grocery store in the Arctic isn't like anywhere else. We get supply deliveries by plane twice a week if we're lucky, once if the weather's bad. Everything costs 3 times what it does down south. A gallon of milk runs about $12, bread's $8 a loaf. People depend on us. When the storms hit and nobody can leave their houses for days, we're the lifeline. I've worked through blizzards that would shut down entire cities, kept the store running during power outages that lasted a week, and dealt with drunk hunters trying to trade caribou meat for beer. I thought I'd seen everything this place could throw at me, The isolation, the cold, the darkness that swallows everything for months at a time. But during the polar night of 2008, something started hunting in our town. Something that moved wrong, looked wrong, and shouldn't exist. The police called it a wild animal. The elders knew better. And I learned the hard way that some things are worse than the cold and dark we already know. November 15th, 2008. The sun had been gone for 3 days, and we wouldn't see it again until late January. Polar night in Barrow isn't just dark, it's a complete absence of light that gets into your bones. The only illumination comes from streetlights, house windows, and the aurora when we're lucky. I was closing up the store around 9 p.m. Tuesday nights were always slow, just a few regulars picking up cigarettes or energy drinks. The last customer left around 8:30, so I spent the next half hour doing inventory counts and running the daily reports on our old computer system. The cash register was acting up again, freezing every few transactions and making that grinding noise when the receipt printer worked too hard. I made a note to call our repair guy in Anchorage. Our store sits on Chugach Street, about 6 blocks from my house. It's a straight shot down the road, past the school and the community center. Normally, I'd drive even that short distance in November, but my truck wouldn't start that morning and I'd been putting off getting the battery replaced. The walk home never bothered me before. Barrow's got maybe 4,000 people total, and everybody knows everybody. Crime's usually just drunk kids or domestic disputes. I locked up the store, checked the doors twice, like always, and started walking home. The wind was calm for once, maybe 10 below zero, practically balmy for November. The streetlights created little pools of yellow light every 100 feet or so, with deep shadows in between. My boots crunched on the packed snow, and I could hear a dog barking somewhere in the distance. That's when I noticed the footsteps. At first, I thought it was just echoes from my own walking bouncing off the buildings. But the rhythm was wrong. My steps were short and quick. I'm only 5'4" and I was cold. These other steps were longer, slower, like someone with really long legs keeping pace with me without trying too hard. I stopped walking. The footsteps continued for 3 more beats, then stopped too. I turned around, squinting back toward the store. The streetlight behind me made everything beyond it pitch black. I couldn't see anything moving, but I had that crawling feeling between my shoulder blades that someone was watching me. In a town this small, it wouldn't be weird for someone to recognize me and say hello, but whoever this was stayed hidden. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded small in all that empty space. Nothing. Just wind starting to pick up, making the power lines hum. Overhead. I started walking again, faster this time. The footsteps came back, matching my new pace exactly. When I sped up, they sped up. When I slowed down to listen, they slowed down too. But they never quite matched my rhythm, always a half beat off, like someone trying to copy a song they'd only heard once. 2 blocks from home, I made a mistake. I looked back again, and this time I saw something. It stood under the streetlight I'd passed 3 minutes earlier, maybe 150 feet behind me, tall, way taller than anyone in town. 7 feet at least, maybe more. But wrong tall, like someone had stretched a regular person on a rack. Its arms hung down too far, almost to its knees, and it was pale, almost white, like it had never seen sunlight. Even from that distance, I could see its eyes reflecting the streetlight. Just like a dog's eyes in headlights, but bigger. Much bigger. I ran the rest of the way home. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I started to drift off, I'd hear something outside. Footsteps in the snow, scratching at the walls, or tapping on the windows. Probably just the wind and my imagination, but I kept the lights on anyway. The next morning, I called in sick. First time in 3 years. I spent the day looking out my windows and trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. When my neighbor Mrs. Aknavigak came over with soup around lunchtime, I almost told her about it, but it sounded crazy even in my own head. I went back to work the following day. Everything seemed normal during daylight hours. Well, as normal as things get when there's no actual daylight. Customers came and went, deliveries arrived on schedule, and the cash register only froze twice. I started thinking maybe I'd just psyched myself out. Polar night messes with everyone's head after a while. But when closing time came around, I wasn't taking any chances. I called my cousin James to pick me up. He grumbled about it, but he came. "You okay, Em?" he asked when I locked the door. "You look jumpy." Just tired, I lied. Thanks for the ride. James drove me the 6 blocks home, and I felt stupid the whole way, but not stupid enough to walk. That's when other people started having problems. Tom Aknavigak, A.T., Mrs. Aknavigak's son, who works as the night janitor at the school, IT, came into the store the next evening looking like he'd seen a ghost. He bought a pack of cigarettes and 3 energy drinks, his hands shaking the whole time. "You hear about anyone new in town?" he asked while I rang him up. "No, why?" "Saw someone hanging around the school last night, real tall guy, pale as snow. Thought maybe he was one of those teacher substitutes from Anchorage. But he was walking around the playground at 2 a.m. Didn't answer when I called out to him." I felt my stomach drop. What did he look like exactly? Like I said, real tall, skinny too. Arms were too long for his body, you know? And he moved funny, like his joints bent the wrong way. Tom lit his cigarette with unsteady fingers. Tried to get a better look, but when I came around the building, he was gone. Just footprints in the snow. What kind of footprints? Big ones, biggest I ever seen. Had to be size 18 boots, maybe bigger. But shaped weird. He took a long drag. My grandmother used to tell stories about things that come out during the long dark. Always thought they were just stories. After Tom left, I called the police. Not 911, this wasn't exactly an emergency. I called the main number and got transferred to Detective Lisa Amaogak. She listened to my story without interrupting, asked a few questions about timing and location, then said she'd look into it. "Probably just someone passing through," she said. "We get drifters sometimes, coming up from Fairbanks or Anchorage looking for work. Most of them don't understand how dangerous it is to wander around in the dark up here." But she didn't sound convinced. A week later, 3 kids from the elementary school reported seeing a pale man watching them through their classroom windows during afternoon classes. The teacher, Janet Uki, confirmed the sighting. She said the figure was tall enough that his head reached the top of the windows, and those windows are 8 feet off the ground on the outside. Detective Amaogak came by the store the next day to ask if I'd seen anything else. I told her about Tom's encounter and the weird footsteps I'd been hearing on my way home. "We found the tracks," she said, "both behind the school and along your route home. They're unusual." "Unusual how?" 16 inches long, 7 inches wide. 5 toes, but with claw marks extending past them. Could be some kind of modified boot, but we can't figure out why anyone would make footwear like that. She pulled out her notebook. "The pattern's been consistent. Whatever's making these tracks only moves around during complete darkness. No sightings during the few hours of twilight we still get. So what do we do? For now, nobody walks alone after dark. We're setting up patrol routes and asking people to travel in groups. This thing, whatever it is, seems to avoid confrontation. Every time someone's called out to it or approached it directly, it disappears." I started asking James to pick me up every night. He complained, but word was getting around town about the sightings, so most people understood the caution. The community center organized a buddy system for anyone who had to be out after dark. Even the teenagers stopped hanging out at the basketball court in the evenings. But the thing kept getting bolder. December 5th, our store security camera caught something trying to break in through the roof access. I found out the next morning when I came in and saw the ladder propped against the back wall and fresh scratch marks around the rooftop ventilation system. Detective Amaogak reviewed the footage with me. The camera only covered the back alley, but you could see a tall, pale figure climbing up the ladder around 3 a.m. Its movements were wrong, too fluid, like it had extra joints in its arms and legs. When it reached the roof, it disappeared from view, but you could hear scratching and scraping sounds for about 20 minutes. "Why would someone break in through the roof?" I asked. "Look at its hands," Detective Amaogak said, rewinding the footage. The figure's arms were way too long, hanging down past its knees. But worse than that, its fingers were extended way beyond what human fingers should be. Even in the grainy security footage, you could see they ended in dark points. "Those aren't gloves," she said quietly. That night, I didn't go home at all. I slept in the store's back office, with a baseball bat next to my cot and 911 pre-dialed on my phone. I'd never been so scared in my own hometown. Around 4 a.m., I heard scratching on the roof. It started soft, like tree branches scraping in the wind. But there are no trees in Barrow tall enough to reach our roof. The scratching got louder, more deliberate. Something was up there, moving around, testing different spots. Then I heard it at the front windows. Tap, tap, tap. I grabbed the baseball bat and crept toward the front of the store. The main lights were off, but the freezer cases provided enough glow to see the front windows. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, a pale face appeared in the window, pressed against the glass. It wasn't human. The skull was too long, stretched from front to back like someone had pulled it through a funnel. The eyes were huge and reflected the freezer lights like mirrors. No visible nose, just two slits. And when it opened its mouth, I saw rows of teeth that were too sharp and too numerous. But the worst part was that it saw me looking back. It pressed both hands against the window, and I could see its fingers, clearly now. They were at least 8 inches long each, ending in black claws that scraped against the glass. It tilted its head to one side, too far to one side, like an owl, and I swear it smiled. I called 911 and stayed on the line with them until Detective Amalgak arrived 20 minutes later. By then, the thing was gone. But it left handprints on the window. If you could call them handprints. 5 fingers on each hand, but spaced too far apart. And with deep scratches in the glass where the claws had dragged. We're organizing a hunting party, Detective Amalgak told me. This has gone too far. Whatever this thing is, it's getting more aggressive. The hunting party went out 3 nights later. 12 men with rifles, including James and Detective Amalgak. They'd tracked the creature's movement pattern and thought they knew where it was sheltering during the day. I stayed in the store that night, but not alone. 4 other women joined me, safety in numbers. We barricaded the doors and kept all the lights on. Mrs. Aknavigak brought her husband's shotgun, and Janet Uki had a flare gun from her boat. Around midnight, we heard gunshots in the distance. 3 quick shots, then a longer exchange, maybe 8 or 9 more rounds. Then silence. James came by the store the next morning looking exhausted. He had frostbite on his cheeks, and his hands were shaking from more than just cold. "We found it," he said. "About 2 miles out, hiding in an old storage shed behind the airstrip. When we surrounded the building, it came out fighting." "Did you kill it?" "We hit it. I know we hit it at least 3 times. But it kept moving. Jumped over Jake Asekwuk's head, had to be a 12-foot jump, and ran toward the ocean. We followed the blood trail for about a mile before we lost it in some rough ice." "Is it dead?" James was quiet for a long time. "I don't know. But it bled, dark blood, almost black, and when it screamed, he shuddered. That wasn't any animal sound I ever heard." The attacks stopped after that night. For the rest of the winter, people still traveled in groups and kept their rifles handy, but there were no more sightings, no more footprints, no more scratching on roofs or tapping on windows. When spring came and the hunters went out for the first time, they found bones about 15 miles north of town. Human-like, but wrong. Too long, joints in the wrong places, and skull fragments that didn't match anything in any biology book. Detective Amalgak sent them to a lab in Anchorage. The report came back, unidentified primate remains, and got filed away. Officially, the case was closed as a series of wild animal attacks. But every year since then, when the polar night comes, the town organizes armed patrols. Nobody talks about it to outsiders, and nobody uses the word tornersuk where strangers can hear. But the old people remember, and they make sure the young people are prepared. I still manage the store. Still walk home most nights, though never alone during the dark months. And sometimes, when the wind is just right and the aurora lights up the sky, I think I see something tall and pale moving at the edge of town. The elders say it will come back someday. That things like that don't die easy, and the long dark calls to them. I hope they're wrong. But I keep a rifle behind the counter now, and I've never forgotten what those yellow eyes looked like staring back at me through the window. Some hungers are older than the cold, and some predators know how to wait. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've been a certified glacier tour guide here in Juneau, Alaska for 8 years. I started this job right after college because I love the outdoors and wanted to share Alaska's beauty with visitors from around the world. I've led over 2,000 tours through the Mendenhall Glacier area, from easy nature walks to advanced ice cave explorations. I've handled everything from tourist panic attacks to sudden weather changes. I even helped rescue a hiker who fell into a crevasse back in 2012. But what happened on September 23, 2015, during what should have been a routine ice cave tour, changed everything I thought I knew about what lives in the ice. I still guide tours, but I'll never go into those deep caves again. And after you hear what I have to say, you might want to stay out of them too. September 23rd started like any other day. I arrived at the Mendenhall Glacier Visitor Center at 7 a.m. to prep for my afternoon ice cave tour. The weather was perfect, crisp at 28 degrees, clear skies, and minimal wind. These are the conditions every glacier guide dreams of. I had 12 tourists signed up, all adults, which made things easier. Kids tend to get scared in the caves even under normal circumstances. My group included a retired couple from Texas, some college students on spring break, and a few solo travelers with expensive cameras. Everyone seemed excited and well prepared with proper gear. I spent the morning checking equipment: helmets, headlamps, ice cleats, emergency radios, first aid kit, rope systems, and my digital thermometer. Everything was working perfectly. The ice cave we were visiting was one of my favorites, about a quarter mile into the glacier with beautiful blue formations and excellent acoustics. I'd been in that exact cave probably 300 times over the years. At 2:30 p.m., we set off. The hike to the cave entrance takes about 20 minutes over relatively easy terrain. I gave my usual safety speech about staying together, watching for loose ice, and following my lead at all times. The group was in good spirits, taking photos and asking the typical questions about glacier formation and climate change. The entrance to the ice cave is about 6 feet high and wide enough for 2 people. I always go in first to check conditions, then bring the group through one at a time. That day, everything looked normal. The ice was stable, no new cracks or unsafe areas. The temperature inside held steady at 32 degrees, just like always. But about 50 feet into the cave system, I noticed something that made me stop in my tracks. There was a blue-green glow coming from deeper in the cave. Not the normal glacial blue you see everywhere in the ice. This was different, brighter. And it seemed to be moving. I'd never seen anything like it before. Glacier ice can have different colors depending on air bubbles and density, but this was unlike any natural formation I knew about. The light seemed to pulse with a steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. "Jake, what's that pretty light back there?" asked Mrs. Henderson from Texas, pointing toward the glow. "I'm not sure," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Let me check it out." I pulled out my digital thermometer to take a reading as we moved closer. The device immediately started showing numbers that didn't make sense. Instead of the normal 32 degrees, it was reading -15 degrees Fahrenheit. I tapped the screen, thinking it was malfunctioning, but the reading stayed the same. That's when I noticed how quiet it had gotten. In 8 years of guiding, I'd learned that ice caves have their own sounds: dripping water, settling ice, wind echoing through passages. But now there was nothing. Complete silence, except for our breathing and footsteps. "Does anyone else feel like we're being watched?" whispered one of the college students. Several people nodded. That feeling of unseen eyes was so strong it made the hair on my neck stand up. I'd never experienced anything like it in all my years underground. Then we heard it. A low humming sound that seemed to come from the ice walls themselves. It was so deep I felt it more than heard it, vibrating through my chest and into my bones. My equipment readings showed the sound was at 12 hertzes, below the normal range of human hearing. "What is that noise?" asked another tourist, looking around nervously. "Probably just ice settling," I said, but I didn't believe it myself. Ice doesn't hum. That's when I saw it clearly for the first time. About 30 feet ahead, embedded in the glacier wall, was something that shouldn't exist. It looked like a figure, tall, maybe 8 feet or more, with an elongated shape that was almost human but wrong in ways I couldn't explain. It was translucent, like looking at something through thick, cloudy glass, but I could make out definite features. Long limbs, a narrow torso, and what might have been a head, though the proportions were all off. The blue-green glow was coming from inside it, pulsing brighter and dimmer in that steady rhythm. As I stared, I could swear the thing was looking back at me. "Oh my God," breathed one of the tourists. "Is that a person trapped in the ice?" Before I could answer, cameras started clicking. Half the group was trying to take photos, but something was wrong. Phone screens were flickering, cameras were making error sounds, and digital displays were showing static or going completely black. "My camera won't work," said a frustrated college student. "Mine either," said another tourist. "The screen just went dead." Only one person managed to get a single photo before her phone completely shut down. Later, when she showed me the image, all you could see was a dark silhouette behind the ice wall, but it was definitely there. The humming got louder, and I felt a pressure in my ears, like we were descending rapidly in altitude. Several tourists were backing toward the cave entrance, and I didn't blame them. "Jake, I want to leave," said Mrs. Anderson. "This doesn't feel right." I was about to agree when my radio crackled to life. But instead of the normal Park Service chatter, all I heard was static mixed with what sounded like whispered voices, speaking in a language I didn't recognize. "We're leaving now," I announced. "Everyone stay calm and follow me back to the entrance." But as we turned to go, I looked back one more time. The figure in the ice had moved. I was sure of it. It was in a different position, closer to the surface of the ice wall, and those eyes, if they were eyes, were definitely following us. Back at the visitor center, I immediately reported what we'd seen to my supervisor, Ranger Patricia Wong. Patricia had been with the Park Service for 15 years and wasn't the type to panic over tourist stories, but she could tell I was shaken. "You're sure about the temperature reading?" she asked, looking at my equipment. "-15 degrees, and I double-checked the thermometer. It's working fine now." Patricia contacted Dr. Ann Foster, a glaciologist from the University of Alaska who often consulted with the Park Service. Dr. Foster agreed to examine the site and take ice core samples. 3 days later, Dr. Foster came back with results that didn't make any sense. The ice samples contained organic compounds that didn't match anything in known databases. Even stranger, DNA analysis revealed genetic markers that didn't correspond to any known species on Earth. "The genetic material is definitely organic," Dr. Foster explained in her report, "but the sequencing patterns are unlike anything we've cataloged. It's as if this organism evolved completely separately from Earth's normal evolutionary tree." Patricia also contacted local Tlingit elders about the location. What they told us made my blood run cold. Elder Robert James explained that their oral traditions had always described ice spirits living deep in the glacier. The old stories warned against disturbing the frozen guardians who protected something ancient and powerful within the ice. Hunting parties had reported strange lights and sounds from the glacier for generations, but tribal law forbade entering the deep ice caves. "Your people don't understand it," Elder James told Patricia. "Some things are meant to stay frozen, some things are meant to stay asleep." On October 15th, a research team went back into the cave with proper scientific equipment: electromagnetic field detectors, infrared cameras, and sonic recording devices. I didn't go with them, but Patricia filled me in on what they found. The location where we'd seen the figure was empty. The ice showed clear evidence of recent movement, channels and passages that hadn't been there before, leading deeper into the glacier than any previous surveys had mapped. It was as if something large had moved through solid ice like it was water. The research team didn't stay long. Their equipment started malfunctioning within minutes, and 2 team members reported feeling violently ill for no apparent reason. They retreated after only an hour underground. Based on their recommendation, the Park Service installed motion sensors throughout the accessible cave areas. What those sensors recorded over the next 4 years changed everything. From 2016 to 2019, the motion detectors registered regular movement patterns during the winter months. The activity increased dramatically during the coldest temperatures and longest nights, when the glacier was most stable. Whatever was down there became more active when conditions were right. The movement patterns showed intelligence. The entity, I don't know what else to call it, seemed to be exploring, mapping, or maybe searching for something. It avoided the sensor locations at first, but gradually began testing them, as if learning how they worked. In winter 2018, the sensors detected movement near the main cave entrance for the first time. Something was getting closer to the surface. Park Service staff reported strange lights visible deep in the glacier at night. Radio equipment near the visitor center picked up interference patterns that matched the 12 Hz humming frequency I'd heard in the cave. And on the coldest nights, security guards reported feeling watched whenever they were near the glacier. 3 separate park rangers submitted reports of seeing a tall, translucent figure moving through the ice during night patrols. All 3 described the same blue-green glow and the same feeling of ancient intelligence behind those eyes. In early 2019, the Park Service officially closed the Mendenhall ice caves to all public tours. The official reason given was structural instability due to climate change. While climate change is definitely affecting the glacier, that wasn't the real reason for the closure. The real reason was that Park Service personnel were continuing to encounter the entity, and encounters were becoming more frequent and more direct. Rangers reported equipment failures, communication blackouts, and overwhelming feelings of being watched or followed. 2 rangers requested transfers to other parks rather than continue working near the glacier. Patricia Wong was promoted to a position in Anchorage in late 2019. Before she left, she told me privately that the decision to close the caves came from Washington, D.C., not the local Park Service. Someone high up in the government knew more about what was in that ice than they were willing to admit. "This isn't the first time something like this has happened," Patricia said. "There are places all over Alaska that are off limits for reasons the public never hears about. Some boundaries exist for good reasons. I still work as a glacier guide, but I only do surface tours now. When tourists ask about the ice caves, I tell them they're closed for safety reasons, which is true enough. I just don't explain what kind of safety we're talking about. Sometimes, on clear winter nights, I can see lights moving deep in the glacier from my house in Juneau. The lights are getting brighter and closer to the surface each year. Whatever's down there is becoming more active, maybe because the glacier is shrinking and its frozen world is changing. I've thought about leaving Alaska, but something keeps me here. Maybe it's professional pride, or maybe I feel responsible for disturbing something that was meant to stay hidden. Either way, I keep an eye on the glacier and monitor the Park Service reports that still cross my desk. The motion sensors are still active, though the data is now classified above my clearance level. But I have friends in the Park Service who tell me the activity patterns are accelerating. The entity is moving more frequently, covering larger areas and getting closer to populated areas. Last month, a hiker reported seeing strange lights and hearing humming sounds near the Mendenhall Lake campground, 3 miles from the glacier itself. If that's true, then whatever was in the ice isn't staying in the ice anymore. I don't know what's going to happen when tourists start encountering this thing outside the controlled environment of a guided tour. I don't know if it's dangerous or just curious. But I know it's real, it's intelligent, and it's been waiting in that glacier for a very long time. If you're ever in Juneau and someone offers to take you into the Mendenhall ice caves, say no. Some tours aren't worth taking. Some things are better left undisturbed. And if you're camping near the glacier and you see blue-green lights moving through the ice at night, pack up and leave immediately. Don't try to investigate. Don't try to take photos. Just leave. And don't look back. Because something that's been sleeping in the ice for thousands of years is finally waking up, and I don't think it's happy about what it's finding in our world.